The morning was cold, and a thick mist hung low over the dilapidated neighborhood. Enel, wrapped in layers of worn clothes, moved slowly behind the grocery store, her tired eyes scanning the dumpster for anything edible. She found a half-spoiled loaf of bread, its edges hardened and stale. But it was better than nothing as she reached out to grab it. A faint cry pierced the stillness of the morning and Enel paused, her heart skipping a beat. The cry was soft, almost drowned by the rustling leaves and the distant hum of traffic, and she followed the sound, her breath visible in the chilly air. There, nestled between two overflowing trash bins, was a basket, and inside, a newborn baby lay, shivering and crying. Shock and empathy collided within Enel, and she knelt down, her hands trembling as she reached into the basket. The baby's tiny fingers grasped her own, and Enel felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Her life had been a series of harsh realities and unfulfilled dreams, but in that moment, her heart softened. "Shay, it's all right," she whispered, her voice cracking, and she gently lifted the baby, cradling the fragile body against her chest. The baby's cries quieted, replaced by soft whimpers as Enel's warmth enveloped her. Enel glanced around, half expecting someone to come running, claiming the child, but the alley remained silent, indifferent to the life-changing moment unfolding within it. She knew the responsibility that came with taking the baby, as her life was already a constant struggle for survival, and adding a newborn to the mix seemed impossible. Yet, the thought of leaving the baby alone in the cold was unthinkable. As she stood up, Enel's mind raced. She needed to find food, warmth, and shelter for the baby, all while grappling with her own precarious existence, and the grocery store owner had always been kind to her. Perhaps he could help. She hurried inside, the bell above the door jingling softly, and Mr. Issa, a graying man with kind eyes, looked up from the counter. "Morning, Enel. What brings you in so early?" Enel hesitated, then revealed the baby nestled in her coat. "I found her in the alley, Mr. Issa. I don't know what to do, Mr. Issa's eyes widened with concern. He came around the counter, peering at the baby. "She's so small and cold. We need to get her warm and fed. Here, take this." He handed Enel a carton of milk and a clean towel. "Thank you," Enel whispered, her gratitude palpable. She wrapped the baby in the towel and fed her small sips of milk, her hands steady despite the turmoil within her. Back in her small shack, Enel laid the baby on her makeshift bed, tucking blankets around her to keep her warm. The baby's cries had subsided, replaced by soft, rhythmic breathing. Enel watched her for a moment, her heart swelling with a fierce protectiveness she hadn't known she possessed. "What am I going to do with you?" she murmured, but the baby's peaceful expression was her only answer. Enel sat down, her back against the rough wooden wall, and closed her eyes. Memories of her own childhood flashed before her, moments of pain and abandonment that she had tried to forget. She had been alone for so long, but now, with this tiny life depending on her, something shifted within her. She couldn't abandon the baby as she had been abandoned, and she had to find a way to care for her, to give her a chance at a better life. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the cracks in the shack's walls, Enel felt a glimmer of hope. She looked at the baby, her lips forming a gentle smile. "Mendisa," she whispered. "That will be your name. Mendisa, my little gift." The name felt right, a symbol of new beginnings and the fragile hope she held on to. Enel knew the road ahead would be difficult, but as she cradled Mendisa in her arms, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before, and she would fight for this child, no matter the cost. Enel's small shack was cluttered but functional. The walls, though worn, had been reinforced with cardboard to keep the wind at bay. The makeshift heater in the corner radiated a small but steady warmth, casting a faint glow that illuminated the room. Enel moved quickly, her movements purposeful despite the exhaustion etched on her face. "Shaish, it's okay, little one," she murmured as she laid Mendisa on a pile of old blankets that served as a makeshift changing area. The baby squirmed and whimpered, but Enel's gentle cooing soon calmed her. With practiced hands, she fashioned a diaper out of an old shirt, securing it with strips of cloth. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. "Just a bit longer, sweetheart," Enel whispered, smoothing Mendisa's tiny brow. She walked to a small shelf and retrieved a bottle. The milk, donated by the kind store owner Mr. Issa, was a rare luxury, and Anel carefully poured it into the bottle, testing the temperature on her wrist before offering it to Mandisa. The baby latched on eagerly, her small hands gripping the bottle. As Mandisa drank, Anel watched her with a mixture of awe and determination. This child, abandoned and vulnerable, had given her a renewed sense of purpose. She sat beside Mandisa, gently stroking her cheek. Anel's thoughts drifted back to her own childhood, and she saw flashes of her stepfather's angry face, the sting of his hand against her skin, and the cold, impersonal walls of the orphanage where she had spent so many years. Those memories were a stark contrast to the tender scene before her. Anel remembered the nights she had cried herself to sleep, longing for a mother's touch, a father's protection. She had learned early on that the world was a harsh place, one where trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. But here, in this moment, with Mandisa cradled in her arms, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. As Mandisa finished the bottle, Anel lifted her to her shoulder, gently patting her back, and the baby let out a small burp, followed by a contented sigh. Anel smiled, a rare and genuine expression that lit up her tired features. She rocked Mandisa gently, humming a lullaby she barely remembered from her own childhood. The memories continued to flood back, unbidden, and she saw herself as a little girl, hiding under the kitchen table as her stepfather raged above her. She remembered the cold, institutional feel of the orphanage, the way the other children had teased her for her red hair and freckles. These fragments of her past, both painful and sweet, intertwined with the present as she held Mandisa. Anel knew that she couldn't change her own past, but she could shape Mandisa's future. The room grew warmer as the heater continued its steady hum. Mandisa's eyes drooped, her small body relaxing into sleep. Anel laid her down gently, tucking the blankets around her. She sat beside the makeshift crib, watching the rise and fall of Mandisa's tiny chest, and in that moment, the world outside their small sanctuary seemed distant and unimportant. The morning light filtered through the cracks again, heralding a new day. Anel woke with renewed determination, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Holding Mandisa close, she stepped outside, ready to begin their journey together. The streets were familiar yet daunting. Anel walked past the spots where she had once begged, now carrying Mandisa strapped to her chest in a makeshift sling. The baby's gentle breathing provided a small comfort as Anel navigated through the bustling city. Morning, Anel called out Mrs. Adi from the corner store, and Anel nodded, her eyes scanning the street for any signs of work. She had to find ways to provide for Mandisa, even if it meant doing the hardest jobs. Her first stop was a local cafe. The owner, Mr. Jabari, knew her well. "Got any work for me today?" Anel asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "Mr. Jabari looked at her, then at the baby. "I need someone to wash dishes. You up for it?" Anel nodded, adjusting Mandisa in the sling. "I'll manage." The cafe kitchen was small and hot. Anela plunged her hands into the soapy water, scrubbing dishes as quickly as she could. Mandisa stirred, and Anel paused to rock her gently, humming a lullaby. The baby's eyes fluttered open and closed, finally settling into a peaceful sleep. Despite the relentless pace, Anel felt a sense of purpose, and each plate she washed, each floor she scrubbed, brought her closer to providing a better life for Mandisa. But the hours were long, and her body was beginning to betray her. A cough that had started as a mild irritation now racked her chest, leaving her breathless. "Take a break, Anel, Mr. Jabari said, his tone more sympathetic than usual. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine," Anel replied, forcing a smile. "Just a few more dishes, Mr. Jabari shook his head but didn't press further. Anel's determination was both her greatest strength and her biggest weakness, and she couldn't afford to rest, not when Mandisa's future depended on her. After finishing at the cafe, Anel moved on to her next job, cleaning houses in a nearby neighborhood. Mrs. Adisa, one of her regular employers, was a stern woman but fair, and she noticed Anel's pallor and the way she struggled to hide her coughs. "Anel, you need to take care of yourself, Mrs. Adisa said, handing her a glass of water. You can't help the baby if you're sick." Anel nodded, grateful for the concern but knowing she had no choice. "I'll be fine, Mrs. Adisa. Just need to get through today." "Mrs." Adisa watched her for a moment, then nodded. "Well, if you need anything, let me know." The day dragged on, each task more grueling than the last. By the time Anel finished, the sun was setting. She made her way back to the shack, her body aching with fatigue, and the journey felt longer than usual. Every step a test of her resolve. Inside the shack, the familiar warmth of the makeshift heater greeted her. She gently laid Mandisa down, the baby's innocent smile a balm for her weary soul, and Anela sat down heavily, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The day's efforts had taken a toll, but the sight of Mandisa made it all worthwhile. As night fell, Anel rocked Mandisa to sleep, the baby's gentle breathing a lullaby of its own. She whispered softly, "We'll get through this, my little one. Together." The moonlight filtered through the cracks in the shack, casting a soft glow on mother and child. Anel felt a flicker of hope amidst the exhaustion, a reminder that despite the hardships, she had something precious to fight for. 5 years later, life had become a bit more stable for Anel and Mandisa. They lived in a small but cozy apartment, where laughter often echoed through the rooms. Mandisa had grown into a lively, well-mannered child, her smile a constant source of joy for Anel. Though they weren't wealthy, they had enough to get by, and that was enough for Anel. One day, after a particularly severe coughing fit that left her breathless and weak, Anel decided it was time to see a doctor. She had been dismissing her symptoms as mere exhaustion, but this felt different, more alarming. With Mandisa in tow, she made her way to a small, overcrowded clinic in their neighborhood. The clinic was a chaotic place, filled with anxious patients and the smell of antiseptic hanging thick in the air, and Anel waited patiently, trying to keep Mandisa entertained with a tattered picture book. Her daughter's laughter was a small comfort amidst the uncertainty. "Anel Silva?" The nurse called out, and Anel stood, lifting Mandisa onto her hip, and they were led to a stark, impersonal examination room. The walls were bare, and the fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow, and Anel's heart pounded as the doctor entered, a man with tired eyes and a gentle demeanor. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, his voice calm and professional. "I've been coughing a lot, and it's getting worse," Anel replied, her voice betraying her anxiety. "I feel so tired all the time, but I thought it was just because of work." The doctor nodded, asking more questions and conducting a thorough examination, and he listened to her breathing, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. After a series of tests, he asked Anel to wait while he reviewed the results. Anel sat in the examination room, her mind racing, and she held Mandisa close, the little girl sensing her mother's unease and hugging her tightly in return. The wait seemed endless, and Anel's thoughts spiraled into fear and uncertainty. What if it was something serious? What would happen to Mandisa if she couldn't take care of her? Finally, the doctor returned, his face grave. "Anel, I am afraid I have some difficult news. The tests indicate that you have advanced stage cancer." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, and Anel felt the world tilt around her. She clutched Mandisa tighter, her mind struggling to process the information. "Cancer? How? How bad is it?" The doctor sighed, his expression sympathetic. "It's quite advanced. We need to start treatment immediately, but I understand your financial situation might make things complicated." Anel's thoughts whirled. Treatment? How could she afford that? And what would happen to Mandisa if she couldn't work? The doctor continued, outlining potential treatment options, but Anel could barely hear him over the roar of her own fears. After the appointment, Anel walked outside, the clinic's doors closing behind her with a finality that felt crushing. She found a bench and sat down heavily, Mandisa on her lap, and the weight of the diagnosis pressed down on her, tears streaming down her face. Mandisa looked up, her eyes wide with concern. "Mama, why are you crying?" she asked, her voice small and worried. Anel forced a smile, brushing the tears away. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mama's just a little scared. But we're going to be all right. I promise." Inside, Anel's turmoil was immense, and the fear of what would happen to Mandisa if she couldn't be there for her was almost too much to bear. But as she looked at her daughter, She felt a steely resolve harden within her, and she couldn't let this illness take away the life she had built for them. She had to find a way to ensure Mandisa was taken care of, no matter what. With Mandisa's small hand in hers, Anel walked home. The path ahead uncertain but filled with determination. The days that followed were a blur of routine and growing concern. Anel's small apartment, once a place of modest comfort, now felt like a battlefield, and Anel's health deteriorated rapidly. Her cough, once an annoyance, became a relentless torment, and each hacking fit left her weaker, and the first time she coughed up blood, she felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, quickly hiding the evidence before Mandisa could see. "Mama, are you okay?" Mandisa asked one evening, her wide eyes filled with innocent concern. She stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Anel forced a smile, her heart breaking at the worry in her daughter's eyes. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired." Mandisa nodded slowly, not entirely convinced but willing to accept her mother's reassurances for now, and Anel turned away, biting back the urge to cry. She had to stay strong, for Mandisa's sake. The days blurred into weeks, and Anel's condition worsened. She debated seeking help from social services but was haunted by the fear of losing Mandisa to the system, and she had heard too many stories of children being taken away, and the thought of being separated from her daughter was unbearable. One afternoon, Mrs. Aman, a kind neighbor who lived down the hall, knocked on their door. Anel opened it, her face pale and drawn. Mrs. Aman took one look at her and frowned. "Anel, you don't look well. Are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. "I'm fine, really," Anel replied, forcing a weak smile. "Mrs. Aman wasn't convinced. "You know, if you need anything, I'm here to help. Don't hesitate to ask." Anel appreciated the offer but declined politely, and she couldn't bear the thought of being seen as a burden, and she feared the pity in Mrs. Aman's eyes. "Thank you, but we're managing. It's just a little cold." As the door closed, Anel leaned against it, her legs trembling, and she knew she needed help, but the fear of losing Mandisa kept her paralyzed, and the weight of her secret grew heavier each day. That night, after putting Mandisa to bed, Anel sat by her crib, singing softly. The familiar lullabies, usually a comfort, now felt like a cruel reminder of the fragility of their situation. Tears streamed down her face as she watched Mandisa sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. The reality of her situation pressed down on her like a vice. She couldn't hide the truth much longer, and the thought of leaving Mandisa alone in the world was a constant torment. Anel's mind raced with plans and possibilities, but each one seemed more hopeless than the last, and she reached out and gently stroked Mandisa's hair, her heart breaking at the thought of not being there to watch her grow up. "I'm so sorry, my love," she whispered through her tears. "I wish I could promise you more." The room was silent, save for the sound of Mandisa's breathing and Anel's muffled sobs. The walls seemed to close in around her, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Anel felt a profound sense of despair, but also a flicker of determination, and she had to find a way to protect Mandisa, no matter the cost. It was a cold, gray afternoon. The air was thick with the promise of rain, and the sky hung low over Anel's small apartment. Inside, the home was filled with the sound of Mandisa's playful babbling. She was busy with her toys, creating an imaginary world on the living room floor. The warmth of the makeshift heater created a cozy contrast to the chill outside, casting a gentle glow over the room. Anel sat at the small kitchen table, sipping a cup of tea. The tea was weak, but its warmth was comforting, and she watched Mandisa with a soft smile, trying to ignore the persistent ache in her chest. Every day was a struggle, but moments like these made it worthwhile, and Mandisa's laughter was a balm to her weary soul. A sudden noise outside broke the tranquility. Anel looked up, frowning as she heard the sound of a car engine. It wasn't the usual hum of the neighbors' vehicles, as this one was different, smoother, more refined. She stood up and peered out the window, her breath catching in her throat. A sleek, luxurious car had pulled up in front of their building, the kind of car that didn't belong in their modest neighborhood. The door opened, and a well-dressed man stepped out. He was tall, with dark hair neatly combed back, and he moved with an air of confidence that immediately put Anel on edge. "Mama, who's that?" Mandisa asked, looking up from her toys. "I don't know, sweetheart," Anil replied, her voice tense. "Stay here and keep playing, okay?" Mandisa nodded, sensing her mother's unease. Anil took a deep breath and opened the door, stepping out into the cold, and the man was already approaching, his polished shoes clicking on the pavement. He stopped a few feet away, giving her a polite nod. "Anil Silva?" he asked, his voice smooth and cultured. "Yes," Anil replied warily. "Who are you?" "My name is Salim," he said, extending a hand. Anil hesitated before shaking it, her grip firm despite her anxiety. "I'm here about your daughter, Mandisa." Anil's heart skipped a beat and her mind raced, fear and suspicion warring within her. "What about her?" Salim took a deep breath, his expression serious. "May I come in? This is a sensitive matter, and I'd prefer to discuss it in private." Anil glanced back at the apartment, then at John. Everything about him screamed wealth and authority, two things that had no place in her world, but there was something else in his eyes, a hint of desperation, a plea for understanding. She nodded reluctantly and stepped aside to let him in. Inside, Salim looked around, taking in the modest furnishings and the warmth of the home. Mandisa looked up from her toys, curiosity shining in her eyes. "Mama, who's this?" "This is Mr. Montero," Anil said, her voice strained. "He's here to talk to us." Salim smiled kindly at Mandisa, then turned to Anil. "Thank you for letting me in. I understand this must be confusing and perhaps alarming, but I assure you, I'm not here to cause any harm." "Then why are you here?" Anil asked, crossing her arms protectively over her chest. Salim sighed, looking genuinely troubled. "I've been searching for my daughter for years. Her mother, Mandisa, and I were deeply in love, but circumstances tore us apart. Mandisa disappeared, and I've spent every moment since trying to find her and our child." Anil's heart pounded as she listened, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. "Mandisa? Mandisa's mother?" "Yes," Salim said, his voice softening. "She passed away a few years ago. It's taken me this long to trace Mandisa to you." Anil felt a surge of conflicting emotions, fear, hope, and a fierce protectiveness for her daughter. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "I understand your skepticism," Salim said. "That's why I'm asking for a genetic test, to prove that Mandisa is my daughter. I know this is a lot to take in, but I need to be sure. And if she is my daughter, I want to be part of her life." Anil looked at Mandisa, who was watching them with wide, curious eyes, and the thought of losing her daughter was unbearable. But the idea of giving Mandisa a better future was equally compelling. She turned back to John, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And what if she is your daughter? What happens then?" Salim met her gaze, his eyes sincere. "I'm not here to take her away from you, Anil. I can see how much you love her, and it's clear she's happy here. But I want to help and I want to provide for her, to ensure she has everything she needs. And I want to get to know her, to be a part of her life." Anil felt tears welling up, but she blinked them back. She couldn't afford to be weak now. "All right, we'll do the test, but I need you to understand something. Mandisa is my daughter, no matter what the results say. I've raised her, I've loved her, and I won't let anyone take her from me." Salim nodded, respect evident in his eyes. "I understand and I promise. That's not my intention. I just want to know my daughter, and to support both of you in any way I can." The next few days were a whirlwind. The genetic test was arranged quickly, John's resources ensuring there was no delay. Anil felt a mixture of dread and anticipation as they waited for the results, and she couldn't help but wonder how this would change their lives. But she held onto her promise to protect Mandisa above all else. When the day of the results arrived, Salim returned to their apartment and Anil's heart pounded as she opened the door. He held an envelope in his hand, his expression a mix of hope and anxiety. "Shall we?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Anil nodded, leading him inside. Mandisa was playing quietly in the corner, unaware of the significance of the moment. Salim opened the envelope, his hands shaking, and he read the results, then looked up at Anil, his eyes filled with tears. "She's my daughter," he whispered, his voice breaking, his hand trembling slightly. "Mandisa is my daughter." Anel felt a wave of relief and fear wash over her. The confirmation was both a blessing and a challenge, and she looked at John, seeing the genuine love and longing in his eyes. He wasn't a threat, he was a father who had found his child. "Thank you," Anel Salim said, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for taking care of her, for loving her. I promise I'll do everything I can to support you both." Anel looked at him, her eyes searching for sincerity. "What exactly are you proposing, John?" "I want to support you both," Salim replied. "I know you're struggling with your health, and let me help with your medical treatment. Let me ensure Mandisa has everything she needs. You won't lose her. We'll figure this out together." Anel's heart ached with gratitude and fear. She had spent years guarding herself and her daughter, fighting to survive. Trusting someone, even with the best intentions, felt like stepping off a cliff. "John," she said slowly, "I appreciate your offer, but Mandisa is my world. I've fought so hard to keep her safe. How do I know this won't change everything?" Salim leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Because I'm not here to take over. I'm here to help. Anel, I see your strength and your love for Mandisa, and that's something I respect deeply. Let me be a part of her life, our lives, in a way that supports you, not undermines you." Anel sighed, her shoulders heavy with the weight of the decision. She looked towards Mandisa's room, where laughter and the sound of toys being shuffled around filtered through the door, and her daughter's happiness was paramount. "All right," Anel said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll try this, but understand, John. If anything threatens my bond with Mandisa, I won't hesitate to protect her." Salim nodded, relief washing over his features. "I understand. Anel, you have my word." Days turned into weeks as they navigated their new reality. John's presence became a regular part of their lives, and he arranged for Anel to see specialists for her cancer treatment, and although the journey was daunting, Anel found a strange sense of comfort in not having to face it alone. Mandisa adjusted to the changes with the resilience of youth, and she warmed to John, who showered her with genuine affection and interest. They spent afternoons at the park, where Salim taught her to ride a bike, and evenings where he helped her with her homework. One evening, as Anel sat by the window watching the city lights, Salim approached her. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his concern evident. "Better," Anel replied honestly. The treatments were grueling, but knowing Mandisa was well cared for lifted a burden from her shoulders. "I'm glad to hear that," Salim said. He hesitated, then added, "Anel, I want you to know something, and this isn't just about Mandisa. I care about you too, and I want you to get better, for her sake and for yours." Anel looked at him, surprised by the depth of his words, and she had grown accustomed to facing life alone. But John's sincerity was undeniable. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." The weeks that followed were a testament to the power of support and shared purpose. Anel's health slowly began to improve, and with it, her outlook on the future. She and Salim developed a rhythm, a partnership grounded in mutual respect and a shared love for Mandisa. One evening, as they all sat together for dinner, Mandisa looked up at them, her eyes bright. "Mama, mister, does this mean we're like a family now?" Anel and Salim exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. "Yes, sweetheart," Anel said, her voice steady. "In a way, we are." Mandisa beamed, her smile lighting up the room. "I like that," she said simply, returning to her meal with the contentment of a child who feels safe and loved. After dinner, as Mandisa played with her toys, Salim and Anel sat together, talking quietly. They spoke of hopes and plans, of the future they wanted to build for Mandisa. For the first time in a long while, Anel allowed herself to dream, to imagine a life beyond survival. As the night deepened, Anel felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had thrown countless hardships her way, but she had found an unexpected ally. Together they would face whatever came next, bound by their love for Mandisa and their shared determination to give her the best possible future. The city outside was quiet, the stars hidden behind a veil of clouds, and inside their small apartment, there was warmth and light, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Anel looked at Salim and Mandisa, her heart full as this was their new beginning, and she was ready to embrace it. The city outside was quiet, the stars hidden behind a veil of clouds. But inside their small apartment, there was warmth and light, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Anel looked at Salim and Mandisa, her heart full. This was their new beginning, and she was ready to embrace it. 5 years passed, and the small family had settled into a rhythm that, while not without its struggles, was filled with love and resilience. Mendisa had grown into a bright, curious young girl, her bond with Salim strengthening with each passing day, and the once tenuous threads of their connection had woven into a sturdy fabric of familial ties. Enel, having battled cancer with relentless determination, now wore the signs of her fight, and her hair, once thick and dark, had fallen out due to the treatments, but she now wore a knitted hat that Mendisa had made for her, a vibrant testament to their journey together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the apartment, Enel lay resting on the couch. She watched Mendisa and Salim in the kitchen, their laughter a soothing melody that filled the room. Mendisa was helping Salim prepare dinner, her small hands working deftly with the vegetables. "Mama, look," Mendisa called out, holding up a perfectly chopped carrot. "I'm getting better at this." Enel smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "You're doing wonderfully, my love." Salim glanced over at Enel, his eyes softening. "She's a quick learner, just like you." The evening continued in a gentle cadence of shared stories and quiet contentment. After dinner, Enel retired to her room, feeling the familiar ache of fatigue that had become a part of her daily life. She settled into her bed, the soft hum of conversation from the living room providing a comforting backdrop. As she lay there, Enel's thoughts drifted back over her life. Her childhood had been marred by her stepfather's cruelty, the pain of his abuse a shadow that had haunted her for years, and the orphanage had been little better, filled with the loneliness of being an outcast among peers who didn't understand her. Yet, amidst those dark memories, there were moments of light and the kindness of the orphanage caretaker who had taught her to read, the rare days of sunshine when she had escaped to the park. Enel's journey had been one of constant struggle, but also of profound strength. Meeting Salim and learning of Mendisa's true parentage had been a turning point. His presence in their lives had brought stability and support, something Enel had scarcely dared to dream of, and the past 5 years had not been easy, but they had been filled with moments of joy and connection. Mendisa's laughter, her bond with John, the small triumphs of everyday life, these were the treasures Enel held dear. As she lay there, Enel felt a deep sense of peace. She had spent her life searching for love and belonging, and now, in the twilight of her years, she had found it. Her heart was full, her spirit at ease. She thought of Mendisa's future, knowing that her daughter was surrounded by love and care. "Mama, are you all right?" Mendisa's voice broke through her reverie, and Enel opened her eyes to see her daughter standing by the bed, her face etched with concern. "I'm fine, darling," Enel said softly. "Just thinking." Mendisa climbed onto the bed, curling up beside her mother. "About what?" "About how lucky I am," Enel replied, stroking Mendisa's hair. "I have you and Salim, and I have a family that loves me." Mendisa hugged her tightly. "We love you so much, Mama." Enel closed her eyes, savoring the warmth of her daughter's embrace. "I know, my love, and I love you both more than words can say." Salim entered the room, smiling at the sight of the two of them together. "Everything all right in here?" "Yes," Enel replied, opening her eyes and looking at him. "Everything is perfect." Salim sat on the edge of the bed, taking Enel's hand in his. "You've been through so much, Enel. You're the strongest person I know." Enel squeezed his hand, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you for everything." The room fell into a comfortable silence, the bond between them palpable. Enel felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing that Mendisa and Salim would continue to care for each other. Her journey had been long and arduous, but it had led her to this moment of peace and fulfillment. As the night deepened, Enel's eyelids grew heavy. She listened to the gentle rhythm of Salim and Mendisa's breathing, feeling their love surround her. She thought of the life she had lived, the battles she had fought, and the love she had found, and with a heart full of gratitude and a spirit at peace, Enel closed her eyes for the last time. She felt herself drift away, a smile on her lips, as she went to be with the Lord. The love she had searched for all her life was now a part of her, guiding her to her final rest. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the story of Enel and Mendisa as much as I did. It's a powerful reminder that, no matter how tough life gets, There's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and Annel's journey was filled with pain and struggle, from her abusive childhood to battling cancer. But through it all, she remained strong and loving, finding solace in the family she built with Salim and Mendisa. Her story shows us that God always blesses those who are good at heart. Even when things seem hopeless, there's a reason for everything, and happiness will eventually come to those who believe and persevere. Remember, every challenge we face is an opportunity for growth, and every hardship can lead to a brighter future. Annel found love and peace in her final days, surrounded by those who loved her, and it's a testament to the power of faith and the belief that everything happens for a reason. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more heartwarming and inspirational tales, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Together we'll explore more stories that remind us of the strength of the human spirit and the blessings that await us all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay blessed and keep believing.